The moonlight cast long shadows across the worn floorboards of Ronan Irwin's cabin as he jolted awake, his heart pounding against his ribs like a wild Mustang. The empty cradle beside his bed swayed gently from the draft whistling through the cracks in the walls, a haunting reminder of all he had lost. It was 1872, and the Dakota Territory was as unforgiving as it was beautiful. Ronan had built this homestead with his own 2 hands 3 years ago, carving out a life from the harsh wilderness after returning from the war. The small ranch was modest but sturdy, a testament to his determination to build something permanent in a world that had taken so much from him. He sat up, rubbing his calloused hands over his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath his fingertips. Sleep rarely came easy these days, not since Sarah had died in childbirth the previous winter, taking their unborn child with her. The cradle, lovingly crafted from pine he'd harvested himself, remained empty, a painful monument to dreams unfulfilled. A sound from outside caught his attention. Not the usual nocturnal chorus of coyotes or the wind whispering through the tall grass, but something distinctly human. Footsteps, hesitant and light, approached his door. Ronan reached for his Colt revolver, the metal cold against his palm as he moved silently toward the entrance. Living alone on the frontier had taught him caution. Raiders, desperate drifters, and renegades were common enough threats to keep any sensible man vigilant. The knock, when it came, was so soft he almost thought he'd imagined it. 3 gentle taps, barely audible above the chirping of crickets outside. "Who's there?" He called, voice rough from disuse. No answer came, but the knock repeated, more urgent this time. Ronan positioned himself beside the door, gun raised, and slowly lifted the latch with his free hand. The hinges creaked as he pulled it open just enough to peer outside. Standing on his porch, illuminated by the silver glow of the moon, was a woman. Her dress was torn and mudded, her dark hair falling in disheveled waves around a face pale with exhaustion. But what caught his attention most was the small bundle cradled protectively in her arms. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking on the single word. "Help us." Before he could respond, her knees buckled. Ronan lunged forward, catching her against his chest with one arm while maintaining his grip on the revolver. The bundle in her arms squirmed and let out a tiny, mewling cry. "A baby! Good Lord," he muttered, quickly holstering his weapon and scooping the woman fully into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, frighteningly so, as if she'd been surviving on little more than determination for far too long. Inside the cabin, he gently laid her on his bed, careful not to disturb the infant. The woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of summer sage. "My name is Olivia Evans," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is my daughter, Alice. We've been traveling for days." Her arms tightened protectively around the baby. "Men are looking for us. Bad men. I saw your light. I didn't know where else to go." Ronan lit a lantern, casting a warm glow throughout the small cabin. In the improved light, he could see the bruises on her wrists, the scratches on her cheek, and the unmistakable fear in her eyes. "You're safe here, Mrs. Evans," he said, keeping his voice gentle as he moved to heat water on the stove. "I'm Ronan Irwin. This is my ranch." "Miss," she corrected weakly. "I'm not married." The baby began to cry in earnest now, tiny fists waving in the air. "She's hungry," Olivia said, attempting to sit up. "I haven't been able to feed her properly for almost a day." Ronan turned away to give her privacy. "I have some goat's milk from my small herd. It's not ideal for a baby, but it might help until morning." He busied himself preparing a makeshift bottle using a clean cloth and a small glass container while Olivia soothed the crying infant. When he turned back, she was sitting upright against his pillows, cradling Alice against her chest. "How old is she?" he asked, handing over the milk. "Almost 3 months," Olivia replied, expertly guiding the cloth-wrapped bottle to the baby's mouth. As the infant began to suckle, her cries subsided. "Thank you for this, for everything." Ronan nodded, suddenly uncomfortable with the gratitude in her eyes. "You should rest. We can talk more in the morning." "What about you? I've taken your bed," he gestured to a chair near the hearth. "I've slept in worse places." As Olivia's eyes drifted shut, Ronan found himself looking at the empty cradle beside the bed. For the first time since he'd built it, its presence didn't fill him with sorrow. Instead, he felt something stir within him that he'd thought long dead, a flicker of purpose. Dawn broke with streaks of pink and gold across the vast Dakota sky. Ronan had risen early, tending to his small herd of cattle and the vegetable garden that supplemented his meals. By the time he returned to the cabin, the sun had fully crested the horizon, bathing the prairie in golden light. He found Olivia awake, sitting at his rough-hewn table with Alice in her arms. She'd washed her face and attempted to smooth her hair, though her dress remained torn and stained. "Good morning," he said, setting down the basket of fresh eggs he'd collected. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she replied, offering a tentative smile that transformed her tired face. "Thank you again for your kindness, Mr. Irwin." "Ronan," he corrected, suddenly self-conscious of his mud-splattered boots and sweat-stained shirt. It had been a long time since he'd had company, especially female company. "Are you hungry? I can make breakfast." While he prepared a simple meal of eggs and biscuits, Olivia told him her story. She'd been working as a schoolteacher in a small town near Bismarck when she'd caught the unwanted attention of the local banker's son, Vernon Caldwell. "He wouldn't take no for an answer," she explained, her voice hardening as she stroked her daughter's downy head. "When I refused his advances, he became threatening. Then I discovered I was with child, the result of an earlier relationship with a man who'd promised to return from his cattle drive but never did." She paused, taking a steadying breath. "Vernon spread rumors that I was morally corrupt, unfit to teach. I lost my position, my reputation. When Alice was born, he and his father tried to have her taken away, claiming I was an unfit mother. They have influence, connections to the territorial judge." "So you ran," Ronan concluded, placing a plate of food before her. Olivia nodded, shifting Alice to one arm so she could eat. "3 nights ago, I overheard Vernon telling his father he would make me see reason. That no one would miss a fallen woman if she disappeared, and a baby could be raised properly by a respectable family. I packed what little I had and fled that same night." Ronan's jaw tightened. He'd seen enough of the world to know that men with power often felt entitled to take whatever or whoever they wanted. "You can stay here while you recover," he offered, surprising himself with the words. "My nearest neighbor is 5 miles away, and I don't get many visitors. You'll be safe." Relief washed over Olivia's face, but hesitation quickly followed. "I couldn't impose, it's no imposition," he interrupted. "The ranch keeps me busy, but there's room enough for you and Alice, just until you decide where to go next." What he didn't say was how the cabin had sprung to life overnight. The sound of the baby's soft cooing, the sight of Olivia's smile, they filled the empty spaces that had haunted him for too long. As the days passed, they fell into an easy rhythm. Ronan would work the ranch from dawn till dusk, while Olivia kept the cabin in order and tended to Alice. In the evenings, they would sit together by the hearth, talking long into the night. He learned that she had grown up in Massachusetts, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a shipbuilder. Education had been valued above all else in her family, and she'd inherited her father's love of books and her mother's determination. "What brought you all the way out here?" he asked one evening as they shelled peas together at the table. "Adventure, I suppose," she replied with a small laugh. "And opportunity. Teaching positions for women are more plentiful out west, and the pay is better. I wanted to make my own way in the world." Ronan found himself sharing stories of his own past his childhood in Pennsylvania, his time fighting in the war, and eventually, hesitantly, about Sarah and the baby they had lost. "I'm so sorry," Olivia said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Her fingers were warm against his skin, the contact brief but comforting. "No one should have to endure such loss. For a long time I wasn't sure I would," he admitted. "But each day comes, whether you want it to or not." A week turned into 2, and Ronan began to notice changes in himself. He found reasons to return to the cabin during the day, bringing Olivia wildflowers he'd spotted on the range, checking if she needed anything from town. He took greater care with his appearance, trimming his beard and mending the holes in his shirts. One afternoon, he returned early to find Olivia standing beside the empty cradle, gently rocking it with one hand while Alice slept against her shoulder. "It's beautiful craftsmanship," she said when she noticed him watching. "You made this, didn't you?" Ronan nodded, moving to stand beside her. "Last winter, I thought." His voice trailed off, the familiar ache of loss rising in his chest. "She would be proud," Olivia said quietly, "of how you've carried on, of the kindness you've shown to strangers." Before he could respond, Alice awakened with a cry. Without thinking, Ronan reached out and Olivia gently transferred the baby to his arms. It was the first time he'd held her, and he stood frozen for a moment, surprised by how natural it felt. "Support her head," Olivia instructed, adjusting his large hand. "There, just like that." Alice's tiny fingers wrapped around one of his, her eyes the same sage green as her mother's, regarding him with solemn curiosity. "Well, hello there, little lady," he said, his voice unusually gentle. When Alice rewarded him with a toothless smile, something in Ronan's heart shifted, a peace long broken finding its proper place. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in vibrant hues of orange and purple, Ronan made a decision. "I need to ride into town tomorrow for supplies," he said. "We're running low on flour and coffee, and I should check if there's any word about men searching for you." Olivia's expression clouded with worry. "Is it safe for you to ask such questions?" "Bishop Creek is small, but the shopkeeper, Mrs. Gunderson, knows everything that happens within 50 miles. She's discreet when she needs to be." He hesitated, then added, "Would you like me to look for work opportunities, or perhaps passage further west? I imagine you're eager to establish yourself somewhere permanent." The thought of Olivia and Alice leaving created an unexpected hollowness in his chest, but he forced himself to continue. "California might offer more opportunities for a teacher of your caliber." Olivia was quiet for so long that Ronan wondered if he'd offended her. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I've been thinking about that," she said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Where to go, what to do next. Alice deserves stability, a real home." She turned to face him, something vulnerable in her expression. "These past weeks, I've felt safer than I have in a long time. Alice is thriving here, and you," she paused, gathering courage. "You've become important to us, Ronan." His heart quickened at her words, hope unfurling like a tender shoot after a long winter. But before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses interrupted the moment. 3 riders appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the setting sun. Ronan stood immediately, instinctively moving in front of Olivia and Alice. "Get inside," he said quietly, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Stay away from the windows." As the riders drew closer, Ronan recognized the lead man as Jasper Fleming, one of his distant neighbors. Relief flooded through him, but only briefly. Jasper wasn't one for social calls, and the grim set of his mouth suggested this wasn't a friendly visit. "Irwin," Jasper called as they approached, reining in his horse a few yards from the porch. "Got a moment?" "Evening, Fleming," Ronan replied, keeping his voice neutral. "What brings you out this way?" Jasper dismounted, followed by his 2 companions. "Information's circulating about a woman and a baby, gone missing from Bismarck Way. There's a reward being offered by a gentleman named Caldwell." Ronan felt his muscles tense but kept his expression impassive. "Is that so? Word is she might be heading this direction," Jasper continued, studying Ronan's face. "Thought you should know, case you see anything unusual. Reward's substantial, $500. One of Jasper's companions, a lean man with a scar running down his cheek, spat tobacco juice onto the dirt. "Caldwell says she stole from him. Says the baby's rightfully his kin too." Ronan's anger flared hot and bright, but he tamped it down. "Appreciate the information," he said evenly. "Haven't seen any strangers pass through, but I'll keep an eye out." Jasper nodded, but his gaze drifted toward the cabin window where a curtain had shifted slightly. "Heard you've been keeping to yourself lately, not even coming into town for supplies." "Been busy with the herd," Ronan replied. "Planning to head in tomorrow, as it happens." "That right?" Jasper looked skeptical. "Well, these gentlemen are staying in the area for a few days, looking for sign of the woman. They might stop by again if that's all right with you." It wasn't a request, and Ronan knew it. "My door's open to those with honorable intentions, Fleming. Always has been." The implied warning wasn't lost on Jasper, whose eyes narrowed slightly before he nodded and remounted his horse. "We'll be seeing you, Irwin." As the men rode away, Ronan remained on the porch until they disappeared from sight. Only then did he return inside, where he found Olivia standing rigid with fear, clutching Alice tightly to her chest. "They know I'm here," she whispered, her face pale. "They'll come back with more men." Ronan moved to her side, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "We won't be here when they return. We need to leave tonight." Determination replaced the fear in her eyes. "Where will we go?" "West," he said firmly. "I have a friend in Wyoming Territory who owes me a favor. He can help us get settled somewhere new, somewhere Caldwell won't find you." "Us," Olivia repeated, her voice catching on the word. Ronan realized what he'd said and didn't regret it for a moment. "If you'll have me," he said softly. "I know it's sudden, and I have no right to ask, but these weeks with you and Alice, you've brought life back to this place, back to me." His hands slid down to take hers. "I'm not asking for promises, Olivia, just a chance to help you build that stable home for Alice and maybe in time." She squeezed his hands, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "We want you with us, Ronan." The night was a flurry of activity as they packed essentials, food, clothing, the money Ronan kept hidden beneath a floorboard. By midnight, his wagon was loaded, the horses harnessed and ready. "There's one more thing," he said, disappearing into the cabin. When he returned, he was carrying the empty cradle. "It deserves to be used." Olivia's smile was worth every hardship he might face in the uncertain future ahead. They traveled under the cover of darkness, following little-used trails that Ronan had discovered during his years exploring the territory. By dawn, they had crossed into the neighboring county, putting valuable distance between themselves and Bishop Creek. The journey was arduous. Days blended together as they pushed westward, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses and care for Alice. Olivia proved to be as resilient as she was intelligent, never complaining despite the hardships of the trail. They avoided towns and main roads, conscious of the danger that pursuit represented. Ronan knew that Caldwell's influence likely extended throughout the Dakota Territory and possibly beyond. Their safety depended on speed and discretion. At night, they would make camp in sheltered locations, groves of trees, hidden valleys, anywhere that offered concealment from passing travelers. These quiet evenings became precious to Ronan, as he and Olivia would sit beside the campfire, planning their future in hushed, hopeful voices. "I've been thinking," he said one night as they watched the stars emerge above the vast prairie. "When we reach Wyoming, we could claim land under the Homestead Act, build something new together." Olivia looked up from where she was nursing Alice. "Is that what you want, to start over completely?" "I've never been afraid of hard work," he replied, "and I've learned that a home isn't about the building but the people inside it." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I want to build a life with you, Olivia, if you'll have me." The warmth in her eyes was answer enough, but she leaned forward, pressing her lips softly to his. It was their first kiss, tender and filled with promise. "I think," she whispered against his mouth, "that sounds like the most wonderful plan I've ever heard." After 2 weeks of traveling, they crossed into Wyoming Territory. The landscape changed, becoming more rugged, the mountains on the horizon growing larger with each passing day. Ronan felt a growing sense of anticipation they were nearing the ranch of his old Army friend, Richard Hartley. It was mid-afternoon when they finally arrived, the wagon rolling up to a well-maintained homestead nestled in a verdant valley. Richard emerged from the barn as they approached, his weathered face breaking into a wide grin when he recognized Ronan. "Well, I'll be damned," he called, striding forward to clasp Ronan's hand as he climbed down from the wagon. "When I got your message, I hardly believed it." Ronan Irwin, abandoning his solitude, his gaze shifted to Olivia and Alice, curiosity evident in his expression. "Richard, this is Olivia Evans and her daughter, Alice," Ronan said, helping Olivia down from the wagon. "Circumstances forced us to leave Dakota rather suddenly." Understanding dawned in Richard's eyes. He had seen enough of the world to recognize when people were running from something or someone. "Any friend of Ronan's is welcome here," he said, tipping his hat to Olivia. My wife will be delighted to have company. She complains that I'm poor conversation after all these years." As they settled into the guest cabin on Richard's property, Ronan felt the tension of the past weeks begin to ease. They were far from Caldwell's reach now, in a place where his influence couldn't extend. Richard proved to be an invaluable ally. He had connections throughout the territory and helped Ronan file a homestead claim on a promising piece of land about 20 miles from his own ranch. It was good land, with a year-round creek and enough flat ground for both crops and grazing. "It won't be easy," Richard warned as they rode the boundaries of the claim. "First few years on a new homestead are always the hardest." Ronan surveyed the land, already picturing the home he would build for Olivia and Alice. "Nothing worth having comes easy, old friend." While Ronan and Richard began the process of clearing land and cutting timber for the new cabin, Olivia became fast friends with Richard's wife, Martha. The two women spent hours together, with Martha teaching Olivia the skills she would need as the wife of a homesteader, preserving food, making soap, basic medicine. "Wife," Olivia questioned one evening as she and Ronan sat on the porch of the guest cabin, watching the sunset. Alice slept peacefully in the cradle that now stood beside their bed. "Martha's assumption, not mine," Ronan replied, a flush rising on his neck, "though I can't say I object to the idea." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "I got this in town yesterday." "It's not fancy, but it's perfect," Olivia interrupted, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I know our beginning was unusual," Ronan continued, taking her hand in his. "But these past weeks have shown me what I want for the rest of my life. You and Alice have become my family, Olivia. I love you both more than I thought possible." "We love you too," she whispered, her free hand cupping his cheek. "You gave us safety when we needed it most, but you've given us so much more than that. You've given us a future." The wedding was a simple affair, held in Richard and Martha's parlor with only a handful of trusted neighbors as witnesses. Olivia wore a dress that Martha had helped her sew, and Ronan cleaned up his beard and donned the one good suit he owned. Alice, now nearly 5 months old and growing stronger every day, watched the proceedings from Martha's arms, occasionally reaching out toward Ronan with delighted coos. As they exchanged vows, Ronan found himself reflecting on the strange path that had led him here. The loss that had nearly broken him had also prepared him for this moment, teaching him the true value of love and family. When the local minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ronan kissed Olivia with a tenderness that spoke of all the days they would share together. Their new home took shape over the following months, a sturdy cabin built with Ronan's own hands, larger than his previous one, with windows that let in the Wyoming sunshine and a stone hearth that would keep them warm through the winters to come. By the time the first snow fell, they were settled in their new life. The cabin was snug against the cold, with provisions stored for the winter months. Ronan had established a small herd of cattle and built corrals for the horses. A vegetable garden, now dormant under a blanket of snow, waited for spring planting. On Christmas Eve, they sat before the fire, Alice sleeping peacefully in her cradle, no longer empty. No longer a reminder of loss, but a symbol of all they had found together. "I have something for you," Olivia said, handing Ronan a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover tooled with an intricate design of prairie flowers. "For our story," she explained, "the one we're writing together." Ronan pulled her close, his arms encircling her waist. "It's a good story so far," he murmured against her hair. "And it's only just beginning," she replied, turning in his embrace to face him. Her eyes held a secret, a joy too great to contain. "We'll need to make another cradle soon. By next summer, if my calculations are correct." For a moment, Ronan couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion. His hand moved to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "Another baby," Olivia nodded, her smile radiant in the firelight. "Another chapter in our story." As the snow fell gently outside, blanketing their homestead in pristine white, Ronan Irwin held his family close. The empty cradle that had once represented all he had lost now stood as a testament to everything he had found: love, hope, and a future brighter than he'd ever dared to dream. In the quiet of that Christmas Eve, with his wife in his arms and their children, one sleeping peacefully, one still growing beneath Olivia's heart. Ronan knew with absolute certainty that this was where he belonged. This was home. 5 years later, the Irwin homestead had flourished into a prosperous ranch. The original cabin had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. Alice, now a spirited 5-year-old with her mother's green eyes and quick mind, and her brother, 4-year-old Thomas, who had inherited his father's quiet determination and love of the land. The empty cradle that had once symbolized Ronan's greatest loss now held their newest addition, 3-month-old Emma, born in the spring sunshine after an easy labor that had filled their home with joy rather than sorrow. On warm summer evenings, they would often sit together on the wide porch Ronan had built, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant hues. These were the moments he treasured most. Olivia beside him, their children safe and happy, the future stretching before them like the vast, promising horizon. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the children were asleep, Ronan would think back to that moonlit evening when a desperate young woman had appeared on his doorstep, a baby in her arms and hope in her heart. How close he had come to turning them away, to remaining locked in his grief. Instead, he had opened his door and with it, his heart to the family that had been waiting for him all along.